In the first month of his second term, President Donald Trump has wasted no time in implementing a far-reaching agenda that has ignited both political fervor and legal challenges. Since his swearing-in, Trump has pushed the boundaries of executive power, confirming controversial cabinet members and issuing a series of executive orders aimed at reshaping the federal government. His administration's aggressive approach is not without consequences, as multiple legal disputes loom over the validity of his actions. One of Trump's most prominent moves has been to sign an executive order that withholds federal funding from educational institutions enforcing COVID-19 vaccine mandates. This action, along with others, has already provoked scrutiny from the judiciary. NPR's Tamara Keith notes that Trump's current strategy reflects a willingness to challenge the established norms of presidential authority, particularly as he operates without the immediate pressure of a re-election campaign. The theme for Trump's second term is challenging laws and the common understanding of the balance of power displayed in the Constitution, Keith stated. This willingness to test legal boundaries has been underscored by the recent firing of Hampton Dellinger, the head of the U.S. Office of Special Counsel, via a one-sentence email. Dellinger, appointed during the Biden administration, has since filed a lawsuit against Trump's administration claiming that his dismissal violates federal law designed to protect agency heads from political interference. The case marks a significant moment as it could establish legal precedents regarding the scope of executive power. As a federal judge temporarily reinstated Dellinger, the Trump administration has filed an emergency appeal to the Supreme Court, asserting that lower courts should not dictate the terms of presidential authority. On the international front, Trump's administration is also making strides in diplomacy. Secretary of State Marco Rubio recently traveled to Saudi Arabia, where he is expected to engage in discussions with Russian officials, including Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov, about the ongoing conflict in Ukraine. These talks come amid concerns that U.S. priorities may be shifting towards Asia, leaving European allies feeling sidelined. Eli Tenenbaum, a security expert, warned that without European representation, the U.S. risks negotiating a subpar agreement for Ukraine. Simultaneously, Trump's administration is undertaking extensive cuts within the federal workforce. Reports indicate that over 9,500 employees have been terminated or received buyout offers as part of a broader initiative led by Elon Musk's Department of Government Efficiency. Critics have characterized these actions as reckless and potentially damaging to public safety. David Spiro, president of the Professional Aviation Safety Specialists Union, expressed deep concern over the recent firings of Federal Aviation Administration employees, emphasizing that many of those let go were dedicated public servants crucial to the agency's mission. As Trump navigates these turbulent waters, the impacts of his decisions are reverberating across various sectors, leading to a landscape marked by uncertainty and contention. The administration's legal battles, diplomatic maneuvers, and sweeping personnel changes are likely to shape the political climate in the months to come. With the backdrop of ongoing international conflicts and domestic unrest, it remains to be seen how these early initiatives will influence Trump's presidency and the broader political landscape. In conclusion, as Trump's second term unfolds, all eyes will be on the outcomes of the legal challenges that threaten to reshape the limits of executive power. The administration's aggressive stance on governance and international diplomacy signals a willingness to redefine traditional political boundaries, potentially setting the stage for a contentious and unpredictable tenure. In an era where political rhetoric often blurs the lines of legality and governance, former President Donald Trump has once again ignited controversy with a recent social media post that many critics interpret as an assertion of authoritarianism. On February 15, Trump shared a statement on both Truth Social and X, formerly Twitter, declaring, "He who saves his country does not violate any law." This phrase, often attributed to Napoleon Bonaparte, raises profound questions about the implications of such a declaration from a former president, particularly in light of ongoing legal challenges he faces. The ramifications of Trump's message were immediate and widespread. Critics, including Democratic leaders, quickly condemned his words as indicative of a mindset that places him above the law. California Senator Adam Schiff remarked, "Spoken like a true dictator," encapsulating the sentiments expressed by many who believe Trump is positioning himself as a figure unbound by legal constraints. New York Representative Richie Torres echoed this concern, stating that Trump seems to believe he can act without regard for the Constitution in the name of saving the country. The backdrop to this uproar is Trump's tumultuous legal landscape. He is the first former U.S. president to be convicted of a crime, and his administration is beset by numerous lawsuits challenging his executive actions. Legal experts have warned that his recent claims could exacerbate an already precarious constitutional crisis. Erwin Chemerinsky, dean of the University of California, Berkeley Law School, noted that Trump's early presidency has seen unprecedented unconstitutional actions, suggesting a disregard for the foundational principles of American governance. While many view Trump's statement as an alarming indicator of potential overreach, some of his supporters have lauded his comments. Right-wing commentator Laura Loomer expressed gratitude for Trump's assertion, while Elon Musk, now a special government employee, reinforced the message by sharing it on X with a flurry of U.S. flag emojis. This polarized response highlights the deep divisions within American political discourse. Former Trump officials, including Reince Priebus, have attempted to downplay the controversy, characterizing the post as mere entertainment designed to provoke media reactions. Priebus dismissed the criticisms as catnip for the media, suggesting that Trump thrives on such confrontations and uses them as distractions from more pressing issues. However, the implications of Trump's rhetoric extend beyond mere entertainment. Constitutional scholars have voiced grave concerns about the potential normalization of an executive mentality that undermines the rule of law. The very essence of the presidency is rooted in adherence to constitutional mandates, and as Pamela Karlan, a law professor at Stanford, remarked, a president who disregards the Constitution poses a significant threat to the republic. As Trump's presidency unfolds, it remains to be seen how his statements will influence the political landscape and public perception of presidential authority. The debate over the balance of power and the rule of law in the United States is far from settled, and Trump's latest remarks serve as a stark reminder of the continuing tensions between governance legality and personal ambition. With the 2024 election cycle approaching, the ramifications of this discourse will undoubtedly shape both Trump's political future and the broader conversation around presidential powers in America. In a surprising turn of events, Donald Trump's administration is making headlines once again with bold moves that are reverberating across the political landscape. As Ukraine peace talks loom in Saudi Arabia, Trump has reportedly extended key concessions to Russian President Vladimir Putin, raising eyebrows and concerns about America's stance on the ongoing conflict. This development, alongside controversial decisions regarding prosecutions and political maneuvering, paints a complex picture of the current administration's priorities and strategies. As the world watches, Trump's concessions come at a critical juncture. The Saudi talks aim to bring a resolution to the war in Ukraine, which has seen devastating consequences for the region. Analysts are questioning the implications of Trump's approach, particularly in relation to Ukraine's sovereignty and the U.S.'s role as a global leader. The betrayal this represents for Ukraine will be a mark of shame for the United States for decades to come, remarked Bret Stephens, a columnist at the New York Times, reflecting a deep concern that Trump's overtures to Putin could undermine international alliances. Domestically, the Trump administration is also facing scrutiny over its handling of legal matters, particularly concerning New York Mayor Eric Adams. In a decision that sparked outrage among legal experts and public officials alike, the Justice Department, led by Attorney General Pam Bondi, ordered the dismissal of corruption charges against Adams, allegedly to secure his cooperation in immigration enforcement. This controversial choice has led to the resignation of several prosecutors, including Danielle Sassoon, who emphasized that prosecutions are not a tool to aid political allies or punish political enemies. Such actions have raised alarms about the politicization of the Justice Department, with critics warning that it could deter capable individuals from pursuing careers in public service. The fallout from this decision has been profound. It highlights a broader trend within the Trump administration that appears to prioritize political expediency over legal integrity. Emil Bove, the acting Deputy Attorney General, explicitly stated that the case against Adams was not dismissed based on its merits but rather the need for political alignment on immigration issues. This shocking admission has led to calls for an investigation into the politicization of the Justice Department as lawmakers and legal experts alike grapple with the potential consequences for the rule of law in the United States. Furthermore, the administration is reportedly preparing to take a bold step by approaching the U.S. Supreme Court to facilitate the firing of agency heads, a move critics argue could further entrench a culture of political loyalty over competence within governmental agencies. As the administration navigates these turbulent waters, observers are left to ponder the long-term implications of Trump's approach to governance and international relations. As Trump continues to position himself on the world stage, balancing his relationships with adversaries like Putin against the backdrop of domestic governance, the coming months will be crucial. The peace talks in Saudi Arabia could either mark a significant breakthrough in the Ukraine conflict or further complicate an already fraught geopolitical landscape. Meanwhile, the internal strife within the Justice Department raises pressing questions about the future of American democracy and the preservation of institutional integrity. In conclusion, as the Trump administration embarks on this new chapter, the interplay between foreign policy and domestic governance will undoubtedly shape not only the legacy of his presidency but the future of American political norms. The developments of the coming weeks will be pivotal in determining whether Trump's bold strategies lead to constructive outcomes or exacerbate existing tensions both at home and abroad. President Donald Trump's recent proposal for sweeping reciprocal tariffs on imports has ignited concerns among economists about a potential resurgence of inflation in the United States. If implemented in full, these tariffs could nearly double inflation rates, according to a recent study, contributing to a worrisome trend in rising consumer prices. Gary Huffbauer, an economist and senior fellow at the Peterson Institute for International Economics, expressed significant alarm, stating, "My view is it would mean a real shock to the American economy. Quite a bit of inflation." The Trump administration has framed these tariffs as a strategic move to encourage foreign nations to lower their own import charges on U.S. goods. A White House official indicated that the countries with the largest trade deficits with the U.S. would be prioritized for tariff assessments. However, economists believe that American retailers and manufacturers may absorb some of these costs rather than passing them entirely onto consumers, potentially softening the full impact on inflation. Despite this mitigation, the scale of the proposed tariffs is extensive. This initiative aims to counterbalance foreign taxes, subsidies, and other trade barriers, which could lead to a noticeable increase in consumer prices. Capital Economics highlighted the significant implications in a note to clients, emphasizing that U.S. reciprocal tariffs will be a big deal. Under the proposed plan, the U.S. government would impose fees on imports that match the tariffs and value-added taxes (VAT) imposed by its trading partners on American exports. This approach is notable as VATs tend to be much higher than traditional tariffs. Trump stated at a recent press conference, "Whatever another country charges, we're charging them." The ramifications of such measures could be profound. The average tariff on all U.S. imports could rise from less than 3% to approximately 20%, according to Capital Economics. This drastic increase is projected to add around 2 percentage points to inflation, which stood at 2.6% as of December based on the Federal Reserve's preferred measure. Deutsche Bank's Justin Widener estimated that companies would likely pass along about half of the tariff costs to consumers, which could still result in an annual increase in consumer prices by around 1%. While inflation has receded from a 40-year high of 7.2% in mid-2022, it remains elevated, prompting concerns that the Federal Reserve may need to maintain higher interest rates for an extended period. The potential for reciprocal tariffs introduces unique challenges for U.S. businesses. Unlike traditional tariffs, which can often be sidestepped by changing sourcing strategies, a comprehensive tariff structure would make it considerably more difficult for companies to avoid increased costs. Further complicating the situation is the complexity of determining tariffs for a vast array of products across nearly 200 countries. Hufbauer noted that a more streamlined approach, such as imposing a tariff based on the average rate charged by foreign countries, would not only simplify the process but also reduce the overall fees levied. The backdrop to these developments is a series of tariff announcements made by Trump within his first few weeks back in office, including levies on steel and aluminum imports and significant tariffs on goods from Canada and Mexico, which have been postponed pending negotiations on immigration and drug flow. As these tariff discussions unfold, the implications extend beyond just immediate economic impacts. Nobel Prize-winning economist Joseph Stiglitz cautioned that the uncertainty surrounding tariffs and Trump's broader economic policies create a scary place to invest, potentially leading the U.S. into a stagflation scenario, a troubling combination of stagnant economic growth and rising inflation. Stiglitz emphasized that the current environment could deter both domestic and international investments, stifling growth prospects. In summary, the proposed tariffs represent a significant shift in U.S. trade policy that could trigger an inflationary wave, complicating economic recovery efforts. As the administration navigates these contentious waters, the potential for long-term impacts on consumer prices, business investments, and overall economic stability remains a critical point of concern for policymakers and economists alike. Observers will be closely watching how these developments unfold and whether they prompt a recalibration of U.S. economic strategies in the face of rising inflationary pressures. In a rapidly shifting geopolitical landscape, the United States under President Donald Trump is recalibrating its approach to both Europe and key global conflicts, particularly the ongoing war in Ukraine. As Trump seeks to engage Russia directly in peace negotiations, European allies and Ukrainian officials find themselves increasingly concerned about being sidelined in discussions that could reshape the region's future. Recent developments have highlighted the tension between the new U.S. administration and its European counterparts. Following a phone call between Trump and Russian President Vladimir Putin, the U.S. plans to send a delegation to Saudi Arabia for talks aimed at resolving the Ukraine conflict. This move has raised alarms in European capitals and Kiev, where officials worry that the U.S. is pursuing a rapid resolution to the war with minimal involvement from international partners. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky has expressed the need for security guarantees before any negotiations can take place, emphasizing that Ukraine must have a seat at the table. The decades of the old relationship between Europe and America are ending, Zelensky asserted at the Munich Security Conference, calling for the establishment of a European armed force. He urged Europe to take charge of its security, stating, "This is our moment, or we either stand up and fight or we give up and let the Russians and the Americans draw the lines." Elie Tenenbaum, head of the Security Studies Center at the French Institute for International Relations, reflected on the gravity of the situation, commenting that European leaders now realize they are standing alone. The stark realization that the Trump administration may bypass Europe in negotiating with Russia has left many in European leadership feeling anxious about their own influence in the region. As Trump prepares for his direct talks with Putin, European leaders are scrambling to assert their role in the negotiations. French President Emmanuel Macron has convened an emergency meeting with leaders from key European nations, including the UK, Italy, and Poland, to discuss their collective response. Macron's call for unity comes amid concerns that the U.S. strategy may inadvertently fracture the transatlantic alliance. Meanwhile, the Trump administration is also exploring changes in its defense policy, with discussions around potentially cutting the Pentagon's budget in half once geopolitical tensions settle down. This approach sharply contrasts with the Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth's assertions that America must invest in national security. Experts warn of the implications of such budget cuts, particularly given the Pentagon's ongoing struggle with financial oversight and accountability. Elon Musk's increasing involvement as a defense contractor raises additional concerns regarding conflicts of interest within the Pentagon. Musk's companies hold billions in contracts, prompting skepticism about whether his financial interests could shape U.S. defense policy. as the Pentagon has yet to pass a single audit since initiating a reporting system 7 years ago. The need for oversight has never been more critical. The interplay between these developments paints a complex picture of international relations under the Trump administration. With Europe and Ukraine feeling the pressure to adapt to a new U.S. foreign policy paradigm, it remains to be seen how these dynamics will evolve. European leaders are poised to take a more proactive stance, but whether this will translate into a cohesive strategy remains uncertain. Looking ahead, the outcomes of Trump's direct negotiations with Russia could redefine the geopolitical landscape, potentially sidelining European interests or conversely leading to a new era of collaboration if the U.S. recognizes the necessity of including its allies in crucial discussions. The unfolding events will not only test the resilience of transatlantic ties but also challenge the very foundations of international diplomacy in the 21st century. As the world watches closely, the stakes could not be higher for Ukraine, Europe, and the international community at large. In a dramatic turn of events, European leaders are converging in Paris for an emergency meeting to reassess their diplomatic strategy in light of a recent U.S. diplomatic push under President Donald Trump. The backdrop of this gathering is Trump's controversial engagement with Russia and Ukraine, which has raised alarm among European allies who fear they may be sidelined in critical discussions concerning security and defense. Last week, high-ranking U.S. officials including Vice President J.D. Vance and Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth visited Europe, sending shockwaves through the continent. Their rhetoric, which questioned the foundational security commitments between the U.S. and Europe, left many leaders feeling vulnerable. "It felt like a shock to the system," remarked French President Emmanuel Macron, who summoned leaders from key EU nations and the UK to the Élysée Palace. The meeting aims to formulate a unified response to the implications of Trump's overtures towards the Kremlin, particularly his recent willingness to engage in direct talks with Russian President Vladimir Putin regarding the ongoing conflict in Ukraine. The urgency of this meeting is underscored by the evolving geopolitical landscape. Historically, the US and Western Europe have maintained a united front against threats from Russia, particularly during the Cold War and in recent confrontations. However, the recent U.S. approach, perceived as a potential pivot away from its traditional allies, has prompted European leaders to re-evaluate their defense strategies. German Foreign Minister Annalena Baerbock characterized the situation as an existential moment, emphasizing the need for Europe to assert its own security interests. The Paris summit will include discussions among leaders from Germany, the UK, Italy, Poland, Spain, the Netherlands, Denmark, and representatives from the European Union, with NATO Secretary-General Mark Rutte also in attendance. While no concrete announcements are anticipated, the meeting serves as a crucial platform for demonstrating European solidarity and strategizing on defense spending and cooperation amid rising concerns about U.S. intentions. Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky, who participated in discussions during the Munich Security Conference, has expressed optimism regarding the potential for accelerated negotiations with European nations. He noted that developments in Munich have moved things quickly and that he is looking forward to receiving updates from Macron on the outcomes of the Paris meeting. The discussions will also likely touch on the contentious issue of defense spending among EU nations. While there is overwhelming agreement on the need to increase military budgets beyond the current benchmark of 2% of GDP, there remains division on how to implement such increases. Poland's Prime Minister Donald Tusk, who has been a vocal advocate for greater defense investment, plans to push for a collaborative approach that would include joint borrowing for large-scale defense projects. However, the meeting is not without its controversies. Some EU leaders have expressed concern regarding the selective nature of the invitees, fearing it undermines the collective decision-making process that the EU is built upon. Hungarian Prime Minister Viktor Orbán, a known ally of Putin, has previously threatened to veto decisions that do not align with his stance, further complicating consensus-building efforts. As the geopolitical landscape continues to shift, the ramifications of Trump's diplomatic maneuvers could reshape the dynamics between the U.S. and its European allies. For now, The focus remains on establishing a cohesive strategy that not only reinforces Europe's security posture but also ensures that the voices of all member states are heard and respected. The outcome of the Paris meeting could set the tone for future interactions between Europe and the US, particularly as both navigate an increasingly complex international arena where alliances and commitments are continually tested. The world watches as these leaders gather, hopeful that unity and clarity will emerge from the discussions.